Hello and welcome to this recording of Reel 2 Behind the Scenes with the Apteco CDP. I'm Andy Chislett, I'm a product manager at Apteco and I'm head up the Connect and the AI teams. So what are we going to be covering today? Well, this session is really a catch-up on the Apteco CDP with a view of bringing everyone up to date with the latest features and developments. So we'll be looking at the following topics. What's new in data sources, whether it's a new data source or a feature that's been added to existing data sources. We'll be looking at our enhanced and extensible data model. So how do we bring information into the CDP that doesn't match columns of the standard data structures? And then finally, we'll be looking at a transactional load capability. So before we get started with that, let's just remind ourselves about the Apteco CDP. Using the Apteco CDP, which is hosted in the Apteco cloud, we can import data from a variety of data sources. We can then specify identity resolution rules that control how we bring that data together to form and unify into a single customer view, unified customer profiles that we can then use for analysis and campaign activation. So with that said, let's go and have a look at what's new in data sources. So for this, I will need to go into Orbit. So I'll just swap over to Orbit. And there we go. So this is a system that we don't have any Connect data sources or anything defined, which is why we can then see these numbered steps that we have to take and do before we can access any system. Down on the left here, we've also got these system build to-do lists. So it takes steps us through those steps that are required. So the first thing we'll do, we'll click on the Get Started and define a data source. And again, I'll click on New Data Source here. Now, when I showed this for the first time a year ago, I think there was either 3 or 4 maybe here. So we've been working hard over the year and we've added several other data source types. And they come from things like S3, file uploads, and then we've got some database types on like cloud-based databases, Snowflake, Redshift, SQL Server. That also covers Azure, SQL, Salesforce, MS Dynamics. So the ones I'm going to be demonstrating today, this new one, Amazon Redshift, and I'll come on to the others in a moment. So let's go and have a look at how we can set that up. I'll click Connect, give it a name. Click Create, and then I need to specify a credential. So I can click on New Credential and give it a name. And I'm just going to copy in my credential from my handy page here. Paste that in where it specifies that. If we want to have a view of that, we can do. Have off there, and that will go away and test the connection string. It will report any messages if there was a problem testing that. But in this case, it's tested it okay. So we can just click Add. And now it's connected to the that database. It's given me a list of the tables that are present there. So I can go through those and I can choose one of them. And then I'm presented with a preview of the data that's held in that table. And I could import it into the system, or I could set up a schedule to import on a regular basis if I wanted to. But that's just an example of how you can set up a Redshift database connection. So I'm going to leave that there. And I'll go to another feature we've added fairly recently, and this is to MS Dynamics. So I'll give this a name as well. In this case, MSD example. I can type that correctly. There we go. And I've already got a credential specified for this, but if I was setting one up from scratch, there's a few bits of different information that I need to have captured. The Azure tenant, the instance URL, and then the application and client secrets. and that's used for the OAuth, which is the method we use to connect to MSD. I've already got this configured, so I'll click on my example credentials. It's gone away and got me a list of the tables. And there are many, many tables within MSD, so many, in fact, that you can't see the scroll bar. The UI component we use, it makes that scroll bar smaller or larger depending on how many things it's got to display. And in this case, there's a very large number of items, so it's gone practically invisible. Luckily, we can search for items, so I'm going to look for contacts. There we go. So click on contacts table, and instead of getting a preview this time, we've got this setup button. Now that's occurred because there's a large number of columns in that table, and so our default is if there's 20 or more columns in a table, then we ask the user to specify the columns that they wish to import in the system, and that kind of prevents us from bringing lots of data in that we're not necessarily then going to use. So this is the data source column picker, and as you can see, we can scroll through all of that. We get a little bit of a preview of the data that's in there, and we can also search for columns here as well. So if I look for name, for example, we'll have, let's get the first name, the last name, and let's look for email address now. So email address, and we'll bring in the do not email flag as well. And then we get an instant preview of the type of data that we're bringing into the system. If we change our minds about the columns we want, we can click on this Manage Columns option up the top there. And we've got if we want to see what we've already got, we can change that to show the selected items, or we can sort by A to Z or Z to A, and we can update those columns as necessary. So that's how you get your data in from MS Dynamics. So I'm going to discard that and then go over to one more thing I wanted to demonstrate on the data sources, and that is to the Salesforce data source type. Let's set that up. Again, I've got this pre-configured. So I'll click on that credential. I've then got all of the tables, and we can go through there, and let's have a look at contact again. And we're going to get the same sort of thing, so we can see some of the data that's in there, and we can go through those same steps, but with what we've developed fairly recently for the Salesforce data source is the ability to use a custom query, which you may have seen when I first opened this dialog. So it's right at the top here, custom query. That gives us this dialog here. So this allows us to specify a query using Salesforce own query language. So that's Salesforce object query language. It's their own version of SQL effectively. And using that, it gives us a great deal of flexibility. We can specify the columns. We could perform transformations on some of those columns if we wanted to. And we can also combine the data with information from other tables. So it allows you to bring in data from ancestor tables, for example, so 5 levels, up to 5 levels above. So let's go through a few of those examples. So first of all, if we wanted to get information from just the contact, we could do that with a query similar to this. I'll just click off that, and that will run that query and hopefully give us some data back. There we go. So we've got that data back. Dead simple, quite a simple query as well. Let's have a look at something slightly more complicated, and this is going to be bringing data back from an ancestor table as well. I'll just paste that in there. And in this case, we're referring to the columns from the ancestor table by referencing the table name. So we've got account.name, account.type, account.industry, account.billing street, etc. And if I fetch the data again, Then we get some of that information through, as we can see there, and we include the table name in there correctly. So I'm not proposing to perform any transformations, but let's do something a little bit more interesting. Let's say if I wanted back information just from a particular location, I could take this column name, for example. And here, let's say where count.billing state equals K. And there you go. So I'm now able to filter the data as it comes in, so I can get back information from just particular places. So a good deal of flexibility for that one, something you don't get when you just bring in the whole of a table. So I'll come away from that. If I go back to my presentation, that's everything in data sources I wanted to show. So let's have a consideration of the extensible data model now. So in order to fully understand this, it's perhaps worth visiting the structure of the CDP itself. So this is the standard structure of the CDP. We go back to there. So we hold information about individuals on this top level table, the Apteco individual ID and standard columns, so first name, last name, gender, date of birth. And then we also hold information about how we might communicate with an individual, either it's via email, mobile, home, or address. And we could hold multiple entries for these for each individual. So myself, I've got several emails and they'd all be in here. But to make things easy for communication purposes, we also aggregate up to the individual the primary version of those contact points. So what do we do if we want to store information that doesn't fit those standard structures? Well, we've recently made a change to make our data model more extensible, and we've added the ability to extend this data structure in a couple of ways. So we can add custom attributes, store those against the individual and the contact point records. And we can also now specifically store permissions and suppressions against any of the contact points as well. And this allows you to easily add to the data model in order to record any or virtually any data you wish, and then have that data updated by any data source in the future. You can also record the custom permissions or suppressions against any given contact point, and this can ensure that the contact preferences are fully respected. So here you can see that I've added in some attributes against an individual, and here we've got the attributes for each of the contact points together with specific permissions and suppressions. So let's have a look at how this might work in practice. And for this, I'm going to be using a file upload, and it's only got 10 records in it, so I'll just call that 10. And then I'll select my file. And this is mostly fictitious, but with some real astronauts in there. I don't know if any are actually in this set here. Then we've got a preview of it. So I've got a URN, title, first name, date of birth, some information about where someone lives, together with their email addresses. And then I've got some preference information here. Notice the mix of values that I've got in on that information. And I've also got some information about the individuals themselves, something that wouldn't naturally map to our CDP. So I'll import that data first of all, and that puts it into a staging database. That's the first step prior to loading data into the CDP. And then I am asked to set up a data mapping. So this is a way of defining how the data we've got from our source data is going to be represented into the system that we're building. I've got a choice. I can either create an entirely self-specified mapping, that's called a user-defined table, or in this case, I'm going to use customer data table, and that means that we are creating a mapping going to the Apteco CDP. So I'll click Create, and I'll just call that mapping 10. And this is the mapping dialog. And you can see we have a little pop-up there to say that we have recognized that some of the columns on our input data match those of the standard structure of the CDP. So we've created mappings automatically for them. And they will generally be correct, but it's a good idea to review those anyway. And then I'm left with these other items that we've not been able to establish a mapping automatically for. So that's something I'm going to have to do. Before I do that, I'm going to create a source group. I'm just going to call this Astro. And a source group is a way of grouping together several data sources. So if we are performing deduplications by a source system URN, we would consider all of the URN columns for data sources within that source group to be equivalent. So we know that URN1 will always meet the same individual. If we had those from two different source groups, we wouldn't necessarily know that those are equivalent URNs. They could be matching different people. So what do we do with these attributes here? So we don't know, it's unknown, it's been unable to establish that mapping to the CDP. But I know that's an individual level item. I'll just expand that. And if I scroll down here, I've got the option to create an attribute. So I'll click on that and do that. So this is called eye color. And I can choose a folder that it's going to be put into and data type. So I'm going to keep this as a pick list item. That's called a selector. And I'm not going to choose a folder, so it'll just be organized underneath the individual together with the other data items. So I'll click add. And then I'll go on to do the same for the other items that I've got here. So dietary preference, let's create that under the individual as well. And again, that will be a selector type. Space agency, let's do that under the individual as well. There we go. Keep that as a selector. And then I've got these permissions columns. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got multiple different values in here. So we've got yeses, ones, trues, nos, zeros, etc. And I've got a number of those here. So I'm going to create this do not mail one first. So I'll put that in as a item against an address. So down here, I've got permissions and suppressions. And they've got their own sections. So I'm specifically creating a suppression. I'm going to call this do not mail web shop. So I'm pretending that this data has come from an online web shop. I'm creating as permission specific for that source. So this time, instead of just going away and creating the attribute, we have popped open this validation rule. So this is a way of us validating the data that's coming in from the data source. And in this case, we're establishing a rule that is going to look at all of the values, and it's only allowing these values through. And if it sees any of these, it's going to map all of them to be true. So it's a way of normalizing the input data. We could also set up a rule to block certain values. And we can choose what action is going to be taken if we hit or do not hit a value that's specified in that rule. So in this case, we're setting the value to null. So I'll choose to apply that. And I'll do the same for the other items that I have. So this is going to be an email suppression. There we go. Pop open the rule. I'm happy with that. We're going to get mapped to true. We'll apply that, and then I'll do the same for these last two. So suppression again. And finally, we'll do the same for the home number, landline number, suppressions, not call home workshop. There we go. So that's all our columns mapped. I can save that. And it's telling me that I need to OK or apply ID resolution rules. So I can either click on this button here, or because I've used the system before, I know that they're hidden up here. Maybe you're not familiar with it. Let's click on that there, and that opens up the ID resolution rules. And we've chosen some of these rules by default. We have a set of built-in default rules, which we will try and pick in all cases where we have data items in the input data that will support those. I don't know. So here, with the filters, I can show the disabled rules. And you can see there, this grayed out one there. We're not going to be able to match on all the first name, gender, and email address because we don't have a gender in our input data. Under some of the advanced rules here, this exposes a lot more of the rules. We've got 68 rules in total. And we can see that we can match via a nickname or via a SoundX algorithm. And this again is another bit of feature work that we've added in fairly recently. SoundX works well for English language, but not so well for other languages. So we've added in support for Cologne phonetics, which takes a similar approach to SoundX, but is more suitable for kind of German marketplace phonetic matching. So I'm happy with those rules. I'm going to click apply, save, and then I will import that. So this is importing the data into the CDP. So you can see there's several activities going on. It's progressing through them quite quickly because there's only 10 records. And we can have a look at the import summary now. So we've performed some modifications in the validation steps. So for each of these suppressions do not mail, so we found some values that we have set the value to null. They weren't what we were looking for. We haven't found any duplicates in our data source. There's only 10 records after all. And because my data model, my CDP, was already empty, we've not matched any records to that either. But we have loaded 10 records individuals, 10 to email addresses, and each of the other contact points, etc. So what's next? Well, now we go on to define our system. I'm just going to call this web shop. Create that, and then we add tables to the system in order to define the system design. I'm going to say that I'm going to have individuals at the top, and then I can add each of the other contact points to my system. So let's add in the unique reference is, and next to that we'll put in our email addresses, and then next to that let's add mobiles, landlines, and then addresses. So we can save that design, and then we could go away and build it. So that's all well and good. We've got all of that information in there. But what happens if we've got information we want to load to show customer interactions? Before now, we'd have had to have defined something using a user-defined data table, and then we needed some way of matching that against our individual. Could be an email address, could be a unique reference, and we'd have to add it in that way. We can't do that here, and we've certainly got no way of bringing those transactions in at present. So let's just go back to presentation. We have now added the ability to load transactional data straight into the CDP. So if we wanted to load any of that, as I said, we would have had to define it as a user-defined table. And in my demonstration, I'm going to bring data in that's got information about the contact. It's got information about an order the contact has placed, and then a further transaction, the products that make up part of that order. So it's perhaps easiest to show if I show you the structure of the data file that I'm bringing in. I'll save that. I'll bring in another data source. So I'll say new data source. And again, this is a file upload. 500 records in this one. 500 individuals rather. And you can see here that we've got repeated rows for given references. So Mr. Andrew Gray has a couple of lines entry in here. And that's because this file contains information about an order. So we've got their order ID, their status, and the payment method. And then further along to the right here, I've got information about the items that are in that order as well. So this order consists of a planetarium projector and some gravity boots as well. So let's import that data. So that's completed. And what we're hoping to end up with is something that looks a bit like that. So we've got all of our other contact points as normal, and together with the suppressions, etc. But then we are adding in this transactional level of orders and order items at the same time as we are deduplicating the individuals and matching them to the existing CDP data. We're going to be creating and bringing in this transactional data on the fly. So how do we achieve this in Orbit? Well, let's go and take a look. I've imported that data now, so we can create a new data mapping. And again, this is going to be to the customer data table. We'll call it 500. And just like before, we have mapped some columns automatically. All of these mapped items have been mapped automatically, and there's several that aren't. So one of the great things about creating these custom attributes, it means that any data source can update them. We're maintaining the latest version of all that data. So the fact that we've got eye color again in this new data source means that we can map that to the same attribute that we've already created. So I'll choose eye color for that one, and dietary preference for this one. Space agency for this one. And then I've also got these suppression fields as well. This is do not mail, so that's on the address. There we go. So it's just asking me to accept these default rules again. This being a different data source, it might require different rules there. And I'll do the same for do not email. And incidentally, if you've got many columns on here or you just don't like clicking, it does get a bit tedious after a while. After all, we could do a search for the field, so do not, for example, and then that limits what's displayed in this this list here. So do not call mobile, there we go, accept those values, do not call home. And then that leaves us with the transactional data items. So how do I go about mapping these? Well, first of all, we declare that this data mapping is going to be a transactional mapping. It's going to include transactional data. So I toggle that. And then if I've already set this up, I'll have a list of the items here. But in this case, I haven't set it up. So I'm going to declare that I've got a table called orders, or I'm going to create a table called order. And it doesn't have a parent in this case, so it's going to be matched directly to the individual. And then I'm also going to declare a further transaction table called order item. And in this case, I'm going to say that this has a parent, and the parent table is order. So now I've done that, when I come into this mapping area here, I've now got these two extra tables that I can specify things from. So order ID it's a unique reference for the order. So I can call that to be a transaction source URM, and order date. Again, against the order, that's going to be the transaction date. And for the other items from the order table, I can just declare these as attributes in the same way that I did for the individuals. So I'll go through, click on here, give it a name. So this is going to be order status. So whether the order is pending or fulfilled, and we can choose the types as well. How did someone pay for the order? Was it by credit card? Was it by bank transfer? Or debit card maybe? Again, we're going to keep that as a selector. What other items have we got here? So I think that is everything for the order information, and now we're on to order item information. So I'm lucky enough to have a unique reference number for the order item. So I'm going to call that, or just map it rather, onto the order item as the transaction source URM. What product? So I'm just going to call this product here. Create that as product. And that's going to be a selector as well. How many product, or how many of that type of product were ordered as part of this order line? So quantity. And this time I'm going to make that a integer, numeric. How much does each of those products cost? Or the individual items. So unit price. And I'm going to make this a currency. And we default to GBP, but we can choose other currencies if we wish, and together with the precision. And then finally, for the whole of this order items, what's the total cost? So there we go. Total item price, if I can type that correctly. There we go. And again, I'm going to make that a currency. I'll add that in. Everything's been mapped. Defaulted to being the same group, but if we wanted to change that, we could declare it as a different group. So I'll save that. And I've just got to OK my ID resolution rules. So this time I'm just going to take off the unique reference. So we're actually matching via these other rules, and I'll apply that, save, and then I will import the data. So that is now running through. We're loading data into the staging database, or staging tables rather, of our CDP. We're deduplicating individuals. And then when we've done that, we'll start to load the attributes and the transactions against those individuals. It might take a little bit longer as it's doing that. And you can see here that we've got some messages about this. If I wanted to, I could use the filter item here. I don't have any warnings or errors, but I might have. And if I wanted to show just those, I could use that function there to do so. So just scroll down to the bottom. So it cleared up after the import. That's all been successful. Let's have a look at the import summary. So we've validated many more rows this time. We found a few more values because we've got more rows in the input data where we set the values to null. We haven't matched any of the 10 records we had before in the data model, but we have found that we've got 2,179 duplicates in the data source, and that's because we're loading this transactional data, so we've got many duplicated lines. But other than that, that's all looking good. So if we go back to our system build now, I can look at the design here, and I can say add next to addresses, and I've got this one table here. And I click on that, and we add both of those transaction tables to it. We already know the relationship between them and how they join to the individual. And I can then save that, and I can build the system and deploy it when that is all done. So that's how we've established that. And luckily for you, I've already built and deployed that system. And we can look at it in here. And this is a kind of empty dashboard that I've already got. Let's edit that, and we'll add a tile to it. So this could be contacts. And we could choose to have a number tile. So there we go. So we can see that we've got that table structure that we talked about earlier on. Let's put the individuals in there. Apply that, and let's do orders. And again, number tile. So our 435 contacts have placed 1.3, 1,300 orders. And we could carry on adding tiles to that as we wanted to. I'll save that. Go over to a dashboard I created earlier with a bit more information in it. So this is bringing in information about the products, when the order was placed by month throughout the year, the order status and the payment method. And then I've also created a series of audiences to say, don't contact me by these particular methods. And I've included that information as a then on my dashboard. And why not? Well, let's summarize the dashboard. Let's use Oren to summarize the dashboard. Hopefully this will come back shortly. There we go. So that has gone away, and it's given us a short executive summary of the information that we are seeing in the dashboard. So that concludes my demonstration. I hope that's been useful for you. In summary, we've had a look at what's new in data sources. We've looked at Redshift, MS Dynamics and Salesforce, and particularly the column picker and the custom query, which we hope to be rolling out to other database sources soon. We've looked at how we can extend the standard structure of the Apteco CDP to include nearly any data that you wanted to. And then finally, we've looked at the option to load transactional information into the CDP. So thank you very much for watching. And if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. And that's the end of this presentation. I hope that's been useful.